psychologically grinding process to become that successful when you're that young, but probably at any time. To become that successful is an odd thing.
This is the We Make Success Happen podcast.
This is the We Make Success Happen podcast with Matt Callanan.
This next one is an amazing video I was sent about a guy called Matt Callanan.
An amazing and inspiring soul who goes by the name of Matt Callanan.
This is the We Make Success Happen podcast with Matt Callanan.
Hello and welcome to We Make Success Happen podcast. Today, with amazing human and gorgeous lady, Charlotte Church.
Hello.
Hello.
How goes?
How goes, yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question that I normally ask other people at the end. Mm-hmm. What does success mean to you?
What does success mean to me? I think success to me is something that isn't about I suppose the traditional idea of success, of, gathering materialistic stuff, which I imagine it is for a lot of people. But, I'm always searching for something a bit deeper, a bit more fulfilling. So success to me, I suppose, is finding meaning in things. Because we're meaning-making machines. Our brains are meaning-making machines. And so, being able to successfully create meaning out of this physical reality that we are experiencing. And I think that's what brings us the contentment and happiness and those sorts of things. So yeah, it's being able to find meaning in the things that I'm doing, whether that's in personal relationships, whether it's in the work that I undertake. All of it. And also remembering, because I think a great deal of our human experience is actually just about remembering how we've always done this stuff. We've got all of the wisdom. We've got so much innate wisdom within us. Me talking about this in this costume as well. I look ridiculous. We've got so much innate wisdom within. And so I think a great deal of our existence should just be about remembering. So success is remembering well, remembering to remember.
Yeah, because did success mean something different to you when you were, say, like 16, 18, 20?
Totally. I was far more than, I was more of a normo.
What's a normo?
A normo, just sort of quite mainstream, have very mainstream opinions, didn't ponder too deeply about many things.
Did you know you were a normo then?
I don't know, probably, yeah. I think I was striving to be a normo. I was really, my situation was so out of the ordinary that actually that's all I craved. I just wanted to be like everybody else.
Right, I see what you mean.
And also, as a teenager as well, that's what you want as well. You just want to be like everybody else. And to stand out. I think it might be becoming slightly more different now in a way, but in a way it's even more about conformity, youth nowadays, when you look at things like TikTok. It's like an anthill. So yeah, I craved to be normal. Yeah. And to fit in. But yes, it meant back then, I was very much into clothes and image and, all of that sort of stuff, which I just don't really care about anymore.
When do you think it clicked then for this kind of remembering and the meaning sense of success?
I think it's just happened over time.
Last week.
Yeah, last week during lockdown. It's just over time you start to understand, patterns patterns of behavior, patterns of trauma that we all carry. And, life is about trying to reintegrate certain things back into your person, I think. Everybody's been through trauma. Everybody's got loads of pain and loads of dark stuff that we all carry with us. So, I think it's about just trying to reintegrate yourself as a whole. And the vast, not the vast majority of the time, every time, that has nothing to do with money or stuff or beauty or, any of the sort of shallow societal things that we put on a pedestal. And so it's a general, it's an unshackling. And now I think I'm just really interested in creating systems. I still love singing and making music and all of that, and I will always do that until I die. But the thing that I'm really interested in trying to tackle is education, because I think the way that we educate is completely outdated, and in part quite harmful to many people. I think some young people can get through it and can, mold themselves to fit into the boxes and to fit into the shapes that the system needs them to be. But for many people, that is deeply impactful on their lives and often in a negative way. So I think the way that we educate is very flawed, and I would like to try and be a part of how we can change that. So I've set up a school and a charity called the Awen Project, which aims to eventually help to empower and seed fund communities to set up their own democratic, creative schools. We started that last September. We've got 19 students aged between 8 and 13. And we're literally in our last week now, in our last week of term. So it's been an amazing year. Like the exponential learning curve has been like that. Exponential.
Very, very steep.
Very, very steep. And fascinating. By far the most creative thing I've ever been a part of. And essentially...
Really? The most creative thing you've been part of? By
far. That's what education should be, I think.
Why do you think that is? Is that because of the kids and their kind of train of thinking? You're just like, oh, right, I hadn't thought about that, or that pathway, or...
Well, I think when you are... what at the Awen Project, I suppose we're trying to do, part of what we're trying to do is say, whilst adults have a lot of great knowledge in which to curate to children, it isn't about the old ways. It isn't about patterns of behavior. It's about empowering students and listening to young people to be able to create their own systems, to be able to create their own societies based on stuff that we know now, rather than, stuff that we just sort of have been conformed into thinking. And that's part of the democratic element of the education. So they're basically forming their own little society. They get a say in every person within the school gets a say in everything to do with the school, the rules, the punishments, the curriculum, all of it. They have a huge voice and a huge part in everything to do with their education, which takes up a huge part of their childhood. Yeah. And it's just fascinating to watch. At the start, the democratic meeting, which they renamed the gathering.
Yeah, how does that, can you explain how that works? Because I've seen it sort of happen, but for the viewers and listeners, how does that work?
So it happens twice a week, and anybody can put anything on the agenda. A student chairs the meeting, a different student each week. We have got a permanent chair at the moment, so but a permanent chair is about 3 weeks to a month. That means that's a skill within itself, being able to chair and hold a meeting. So
one of the kids is the chair, yeah.
Yep. So one of the kids is always the chair. And they discuss all sorts of different things. They discuss behavioral stuff. They discuss the things that they want to do, things that they're unhappy with within the school and how it runs, things, how they want things to change, different ideas. And some things work and some things don't. And as the adults also have a vote, but obviously are outnumbered by the children, so the children have the majority. But the adults also have a say in what happens. But a lot of the time it means, as an adult, potentially foreseeing something that might not work, but you have to let it sort of play out. Because
even if it's chaos, say
it's never chaos, and actually the more, it very quickly becomes quite ordered and quite structured, because as they're learning, okay, that doesn't work, and okay, this doesn't work, then things naturally become they become better at it, and isn't that the point? So it's been really fascinating, and sometimes it's it's very frivolous stuff, like where are we gonna have our birthday parties, and sometimes it's really deep questions that society itself is struggling with, like should we have separate boys and girls toilets, or how what are we going to do with this person in our community who is a bully, or whatever it might be. So often they're very complex questions that adults don't have any answers for, really. Yeah, really utterly fascinating process. And what I hope that we can do as the Awen Project is empower other communities, and it doesn't just have to be in the UK, throughout the world, to do this for themselves, to set up their own schools, because I think that's what it needs to be. When you've got in many places in the world, including the UK, you haven't got enough funding in education for whatever reason, whether it's purposefully being defunded, or whether there isn't enough money, whether there's too many children, whatever it might be. The state is struggling to provide a decent education for everybody, and I think that this COVID-19 pandemic is being a great teacher, harsh one, but I don't think we've learned all the lessons that this pandemic has to give us yet. And so I think that lots of things in society are going to change and transform, including people's work hours, and maybe including education as well, and how we educate is making us have to have a little think, and also to slow down. Yeah. Because the world was going at such a pace, such a rate of change, because of the speed of technology, that we just weren't stopping to think about anything, and about how we were doing things. We were just sort of on autopilot, and then also just this sort of capitalist, insatiable, consumerist monster.
Get back to work, get shopping again.
and of course that's what world governments are sort of saying at the moment. It's like, okay, well, we need to save the economies, and maybe we do. Maybe that's where this is going to go. Personally, I feel like we're going to keep trying to get back to normal, and this pandemic is going to keep sort of going, nope, you're not learning what you should be learning. But it depends what you believe, isn't it? If you believe that this is a Wuhan conspiracy, if you believe that this is a 5G conspiracy. I mean, there are so many conspiracy theories.
It's all about the 5G.
I mean, personally, I sort of think that I sort of believe that perhaps, evolution is conscious somehow. And this is a very big stop to humanity. We're ruining the planet very, very quickly now. And I can't think of another thing, but before COVID-19 hit, who could have imagined that the world would stop like this? It was just unimaginable, completely unimaginable. So I think that there's lots of lessons to be learnt from this pandemic, and hopefully we learn them. But I'm not sure if we've got much choice in the matter.
Yeah, it might be forced upon us, isn't it? When did education become important to you? Was there a certain event that happened, or when did you want, especially if it became like almost more important to you than music?
I think that with the birth of my children, when they were little, I didn't think about it at all. I'd never really thought about education before. I myself had quite a weird education. I had 2 tutors on the road. I'd still go back to school when I was home, but my education was traveling the world and working. And it was an incredible experience, hardcore, like really, like I had so much responsibility and pressure, but also like what amazing exposure to all sorts of different things and people and environments and countries and cultures. So I'm very grateful for the education I had. So
what was the big education you learned then from that part of the journey?
So much. I mean, I think more than anything, it's about exposure. It's about different exposure to different things in life. And traveling the amount that I did, singing with different orchestras all over the world. I worked with some incredible artists, people like James Horner and, like so many amazing, really powerful people. I sang for presidents and popes and, I was just, I just had this crazy experience. But also I was doing, interviews daily and that was very complex in different ways, because sometimes you'd be on a TV show in Brazil and sometimes you'd be in Japan, and it was all very culturally different and you have to adjust. And so it's difficult to pinpoint what it was. But in part, it was the fact that I had quite a lot of responsibility. I had quite a lot of autonomy in parts. And I did a lot of traveling. But with my 2, it was when we started looking at schools for them. So when Ruby was about 3, and we were going around to the local primaries, and I didn't want them to go to private school. I don't believe in private education. But the primaries were nice enough, but something just didn't feel right. It just felt a bit like, oh, they're really little. they're so little. Like it was like almost sending them to a full-time job. When
you say little, do you mean little in thinking or little? They
were just little. They were. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be sending my 4-year-old to like a job. A Monday to Friday, 9:30 till 3:30 job. Like it's quite a lot. So that was the first thing that made me go, I don't think I want to do this, because otherwise you just sort of go along with it, don't you? It's just what happens.
It's supposedly the norm, isn't it?
Yeah.
What everyone else does.
Yeah, totally. It's just what happens, and you've got stuff to do, and and you want to get on with your career and this, that, and the other. So you just sort of, this is what happened. So we found a little Steiner school for them. Which was lovely. It was like a home from home learning environment, but no structured learning until they were 6 or 7. But even that then wasn't quite right. It's based on the sort of 100-year-old dogma of this dude, Rudolf Steiner, which is fine, if you're into that, but it's not very scientific in terms of what we know about the brain and learning and cognition and stuff nowadays. So then we were like, And all throughout this time, so our family and stuff were like quite anti what we were doing. Oh, they need to learn to read and write. You're going to put them at such a disadvantage. So we had a lot of resistance. And then we said, so then we pulled them out of the Steiner school, and we were like, okay, we might have made a bit of a boo-boo here with this alternative education. So we'll homeschool them for a year and then we'll put them back into the mainstream system. And, we've tried this alternative progressive education. And then when we homeschooled them for a year, it was lush. It was really great. We got to, I didn't do it solely myself. It was me and my husband. After a year of doing it ourselves, we got a part-time teacher in because a couple of other kids joined us as well then. And then we were like, oh God, because teaching other people's children as well.
So it was a natural thing that it wasn't actually sort of planned in that way?
No, not at all.
Right, okay.
Not at all. Didn't plan any of it. Yes, just sort of just circumstance and just happened. But yeah, it was a really great experience to start to think about education and what you want your kids to know and learn and be a part of. And me and my daughter really struggled at the start.
As in your relationship sort of thing? Or?
Yeah, she just really didn't want to be. I was trying to be a teacher essentially, and
because I guess that's a different role to being a mum, isn't it?
Absolutely. And so and she really rejected that from me. Like just could not deal with it. And so then we just went out into the forest and I started doing forest school stuff. And we still do bits and bobs of academic education, but out in the forest. And we do it through the idea of, making treehouse models and understanding how different tribal cultures might build their houses 50 meters up in the tree canopy. And all this sort of cool, different stuff that you can bring in. But just to get outside the classroom just made me stop trying to be a teacher as well, which I think is really important.
As in the traditional sense of what a teacher should be.
Absolutely, because there's a power dynamic and there's a hierarchy and there's a hierarchy of knowledge as well, of course. And what we want to try and do at the Awen Project, I think more than anything, is make people feel competent. And I think that is something that education in general isn't really doing necessarily. But, as soon as people, start to feel quite competent, then they generally start flying. But the thing is that when you spread it across so many different subjects and stuff, nobody's going to be competent in all of it.
And do we need all of that junk anyway?
Exactly, and it becomes so it's harder to facilitate, of course, and you want people to have some sort of base knowledge about around a lot of different things, so they can understand what they are interested in and what they're not interested in. But it's just not how the world works, is it? People are different humans; they are capable in different areas. So then we homeschooled for 4 years and it was brilliant. Really, really great process. And it just, and I think this also coincided with, in terms of my activism and things that I was trying to give back, trying to do to help out, to try and make the world a better place. Wasn't really working out. I was a big part of the anti-austerity movement. I really believe in, kindness and a social safety net and community and these sorts of things. And obviously we've had a Tory government for 10 years, which don't believe in the same things that I do. But, I got to a stage where the things that I was trying to make better, it was just a bit like, going outside and banging pots and pans on New Year's Eve, just making a whole lot of racket, a big load of noise, and nothing really seemed to have that much of an impact.
Or you'd probably have to go into politics, and even then it's probably a massive struggle anyway.
Totally. And the idea of going into politics as is, it's toxic. It's a toxic place.
Seems like a dirty game.
Absolutely. And I've got no interest. Again, I want to be a part of something which is about creative change, which is about, a metamorphosis, a transformation. And I don't know if you can... This goes back to a belief thing, but I'm not sure if you can do that from the inside. I sort of think you need to create systems outside there's a I think his name's Buckminster Fuller. He's an economist. I think he's like a right-wing economist as well. But there's a great quote of his which says that, to have change, you need to create a better system, essentially, which is just better than the old model.
Yeah, and I guess may not actually exist.
Yeah, totally. So just creating new systems of how things work.
You mentioned there that you wanted to sort of give back and help make the world a better place. Why is that?
Because I think it's a duty of all humans that, at some point it is best for everybody, including yourself, to figure out what it is that you're going to bring to the party. And, there's lots of research showing that to philanthropy, charity, kindness, giving back, all of that sort of stuff is really beneficial to us as well and our mental health. And I think within the pandemic particularly, but even before then, we are in a bit of a crisis of meaning in the world. I think that's why a lot of people are starting to feel the effects more and more of mental health disorders. We're becoming a bit more disconnected because of social media and such, and smartphone addiction, which I think is a huge problem. I think that we're having a bit of a mental health crisis and a crisis of meaning. And in part, again, I think it's about remembering. I think the answers are very simple, really, really simple, a bit boring in a way, to go, oh, I see, it's about community and connection and helping and me figuring out who I am and where I fit within this and what I can bring. What are my skills? Who is it that I want to help? What am I passionate about? And how can I do that? And how can I fit that into my life where I have to do this other stuff, whether it's I have to, make money or hold down a job or however your existence is. If we all do a little bit of that, then it's going to go a very, very long way. Whether it's the climate and ecology that you're passionate about, whether it's human beings, whether it's animals, there's loads of choice out there for, things and people and planet in crisis. So there are lots of ways in which to be helpful. And again, maybe it goes back to that thing about competence, to really start to feel, like that you are valued and needed, which a lot of people currently aren't feeling. And I think that's just ramping up anxiety and stuff.
What do you want your legacy to be?
Legacy to me is quite a masculine thing.
Do you think?
Yeah.
How do you want to be remembered?
Traditionally, I don't need to be remembered. I just want I think that children are the last people on earth to be liberated. And I think that, if we start to think about children's rights and how we stop systematically making children conform to the old ways, and that isn't necessarily that there isn't wisdom within the old ways, but actually the majority of the stuff that we're doing at the moment is not really working. So we need to be rethinking this stuff, and we need to be co-constructing it with our young people. So I think that obviously the masculine and the feminine on earth is completely out of whack, has been out of whack for quite a long time. I think that we need to really start to think about how we raise women up, and how we create a more equal society for everybody that it's not equal for. I think that wealth inequality is a huge issue. I just don't know. I don't even know how you start with that, because obviously the the 400 wealthiest people in the world is someone that owns like 60% of all of the wealth on earth, like 400 people. It's like unbelievable. But yeah, there are obviously some gargantuan problems, but there are some very creative, very smart people who are working on them. And I think it's about just a willingness to change.
What's the one thing you were told about success, maybe early on, that you now know to be false or untrue?
There's bound to be loads. I had loads of really bad advice.
Really?
Absolutely.
Well, from a whole range of people?
From a whole range of people, from lawyers to managers to friends to parents. Loads of bad advice.
And I suppose, did it kind of fall on you to sort of were you always the sort of final decider or the decision maker sort of thing?
Well, no, in different... I mean, of course, as a teenager, I felt like I didn't have anywhere near enough control and all the rest of it. But actually, looking back, my parents are pretty good. And they did try and give me as much autonomy as they could in the situation. But then again, I was a commodity. I was earning, different corporations, tens of millions of pounds. And so a child's autonomy gets somewhat lost in that. I'm trying to think of particularly bad advice about success. I think a lot of my success was down to luck. I think a lot of people's success is down to luck. And that's maybe a bit of a bitter pill to swallow. Maybe it's not true as well. Maybe it is all completely hard work and you create your own, at least conditions for success to manifest. Which I absolutely believe in as well. I believe in, hard work and perseverance and patience and all the rest of it. But I absolutely think that for me, I was incredibly lucky. There was lots of very talented people that I knew growing up who didn't get anywhere near the success that I got. So yeah, who's to say how, success to the level that I got to, which was quite rare, especially for my age, where that came from. But also success to that level is a very strange experience as well, because you become public property. And because you become... Do
you kind of realise that at the time that you're kind of almost in that kind of public property
absolutely
space?
Oh, you can't not realise it. Like it's very, very, in your face. People feel like they own you.
That must be, is it a horrible feeling or is it a weird feeling or?
It's just weird. I think, again, as a child, for me, going through it as a child or as an early teenager, you accept a lot of stuff much easier than you would if you were an adult. So you just sort of go with the flow and you're just trying to figure stuff out because you know so little anyway. A lot of it was... just trying to figure out what it was all about.
Well, yeah, when you say luck, why do you think you were lucky then? Like, doing things at the right time and...
Yeah, absolutely. I had natural skill and ability and talent, and I worked hard at it, and I loved it. I had such passion for it. I loved singing. And then, when I started to travel the world and become famous and do interviews and go on TV and stuff, I was genuinely absolutely overjoyed to be there. And I came from a family of performers, and everybody in my family is really outspoken. So I wasn't shy. I was, quite happy just to go and chat wherever I was, which people seem to like. But yeah, I mean, it's a really psychologically grinding process to become that successful. when you're that young, but probably at any time. To become that successful is an odd thing, because it puts you in a realm of where very few people are. And when you're a child, there are even fewer people there. But I also wasn't really into. I used to just want to come home all the time. Like, I wasn't interested in any sort of celebrity scene or hanging out at awards ceremonies and stuff. I just wanted to come home. I wanted to go to the under 18s disco in Cardiff if I could, which most of the time I couldn't. But that's what mattered to me. My world was actually quite small. But success to that level is a funny thing. For a lot of people, it's probably the most natural thing in the world. This is what I deserve. But for me, it was odd, very odd. And actually, I much prefer my life now, where I can foray into the limelight if I want to. And I still feel like, if I wanted to have a lot of success again, I could. But I'd have to compromise some of my values about what I think is important or what I think is good, what I think is worth making. Because I'm not very mainstream anymore, and the mainstream sort of requires, a certain amount of waffle, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
So I'm quite happy with where I am. I get to keep, my little bubble sacrosanct and my children safe and not growing up in the limelight and such, which is really important to me.
So you got a bit more control, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because did you feel out of control when you were sort of like younger or being a teenager?
Yeah, and I think part of that as well is the press intrusion and the press interest, which it was just so cruel. It's a really, really cruel industry, and obviously now that's shifted. Now that's more like social media platforms and normal people being able to say absolutely heinous things. But yeah, for me, it was all wrapped up in being splattered over the front page of something and having my boyfriends, my boyfriends when I was a teenager selling sex stories, which was gross. All sorts of really crazy intrusions. So yes, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. It's not a very nice process to go through. It is, however, as everything is, a teacher.
Mm. Yeah, because I guess you've sometimes got the press and everyone on social media kind of jumping in if they want to as well.
Yeah, and I don't really have that so much anymore. I mean, I still do. A couple of years ago, I went on Question Time and I spoke about...
You're very good on that.
Oh, thank you very much. I spoke about the idea...
How was it on the other side, actually kind of sitting there?
Horrendous.
Was it?
It's absolutely horrendous. It's so nerve-wracking.
Well, because it's live or...
Because it's live, because it's politics, so it's, it was out of my comfort zone. I did it twice. Did I do it twice? Yeah, I did it twice. And also, you're cannon fodder. Really. But also you want to get across what you want to get across, but also there are so many people who are just waiting for you to say the wrong thing. Like
trip up or something.
Yeah. And so I talked about an idea that part of the Syrian civil war was to do with climate change, essentially, that there had been really bad droughts in Syria in the months preceding. And so there'd been mass migration from rural areas to the cities, which puts extra pressure on the resources and such. And so that had contributed to the start of the Syrian civil war. So and this was, I think the Sun went with voice of an angel, brain of angel delight. And this was, this is after years. Like, I hadn't been tabloid fodder for a while. Yeah. And then social media was going crazy, and all these right wingers were coming out left, right, and centre. Charlotte Church thinks that ISIS is because of, global warming and this sort of stuff, which isn't that bad. But then I got quite a lot of abuse as well. But yeah, for me, I feel like it's not quite my generation, in a way. That's for people who have been famous now in the last 5 to 7 years, who have really had that horrific social media stuff. I mean, it does annoy me. I do sometimes have Twitter spats with people like Piers Morgan and such. And then you get, it really ignites and inflames loads of right wingers, but also loads of bots. Yeah. Let's remember that this is, for some reason, there are people who were purposefully trying to make this social media a really confusing, really negative, heinous place through the use of AI and bots and stuff, which is
make
baffling.
People think a certain way. Yeah,
absolutely. It's about influencing, but also it's just about chaos as well. Really interesting. One of Putin's right-hand men, a guy called Vladislav Surkov, he was, I don't think he's still one of Putin's right-hand men, but a couple of years back he was, and he came from a performing arts background, and so he was the one who brought into Russia lot of this misdirection.
Okay.
And this, not necessarily fake news, but they would fund lots of differing organizations and different opinions and viewpoints in Russia just to muddy the waters, just to create
distraction technique sort of thing or something.
Yeah, but it's more about just muddying the waters, so you don't understand what reality is anymore. And I feel like this is potentially what's happening on a world scale now, especially when you look at the rise of conspiracy. So for me, right now, that's the thing I'm most worried about. I am most worried that there are that conspiracies, all of these different conspiracy theories, are becoming a much more widely accepted part of what people believe and think. And that's a real problem, because I don't know how you fight it. Yeah, people are more and more almost religious in their belief of this sort of stuff. And I sort of think, I mean, I'll give attention and I'll listen to every viewpoint, but it's about confirmation bias, isn't it? Is that, and fundamentally what it boils down to for me with the conspiracy stuff is that either you think there's a big baddie or a group of big baddies who are controlling everything, who are, whether it's trying to kill half the world because the population's too large, get all of the money, whatever it might be. Either you think that this is, there are people who are so powerful and so clever and so good at organization that they're managing to make this stuff happen, or you believe a bit more in chaos, which is that actually a lot of the people in power aren't very competent. Our systems aren't very ergonomic for all of the efficiency and productivity we've been working towards. And chaos reigns. But yeah, the conspiracy stuff is the stuff that I find the most worrying currently. And of course, the answer to it is education, is teaching people how to discern for themselves what is good information and what is bad information, and how we discern that, what processes we go through.
That's got to be key for young people these days, haven't they?
Absolutely. But again, the problem is, when you're looking at technology and things like deep faking, will that be as discernible in 5 years, in 7 years, in 2 years than it is now? Because it's not very discernible now.
Everything's going to have to be fact-checked.
But not even fact-checked. Because imagine if you're deep faking video of people speaking. I mean, that's the ultimate fact-check, really, isn't it? Is seeing a video of somebody saying some stuff. Now, if that can be deep faked, then I don't know what happens then. We're a bit knackered. Or indeed, we just turn off all technology. Or maybe there'll be a solar flare, which will do it for us.
A what?
A solar flare.
What would happen then?
If there's a big enough solar flare,
does that blow up the world?
No, it would just knock out all communication.
Oh, really?
All of our...
Is that what you're building in the garden?
No. Only the sun is powerful enough to do it.
Yeah, okay.
It would have to be...
Is that scheduled this summer? Is that this year?
No, but we would only have like about 24 hours notice.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it does happen. Sometimes the sun would put out a solar flare that knocks. So sometimes your phone might go down, and if you phoned your provider, then they'd say, "Oh, well, there's been this thing." They've got to be careful with it with GPS and flying systems. So they have to keep an eye on the sun and the sun's activity. But who knows? I do think that there might be a backlash against smartphones and technology, social media in general in the next couple of years. For about a year and a half, I went back to having a Nokia 3310, just a really basic phone.
So you could just text.
So I could just text and call. And I tell you what, the amount of headspace that I had was unreal. The amount of space to think. I mean, it was just like, it's not even just to think, just the amount of space in my life was amazing. But then it's almost like when you come out of, if you're an addict to anything, then you're very sensitive to the people around you who are addicted. And then with something like, technology and smartphones and social media, there's a lot of addicted people. There's a lot of people who were spending 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day just glued to their phones, glued to checking and scrolling. And
it's that always new, always something else to look at, isn't it?
Exactly.
You can see why people get addicted.
Well, the reason that people get addicted is because these platforms, and they are made, it is within the engineering of these platforms to make them addictive. That's part of the point. And it's very insidious, isn't it? Because it doesn't seem like it's that much of a problem. And you've got this whole marketing campaign that you're connecting with your friends all over the world, and there's so much good stuff that's happening. But actually, it's very shallow, and it's not really connection. But more than anything, it takes a lot of your attention. So when you're paying attention, or when your attention is split to your phone, then your attention's not elsewhere. And the things that need your attention most are humans.
Yeah, the important stuff.
Yeah.
So how do you shift people's attention then away from an addictive device?
It's very difficult. It's really, really difficult. I think that...
Especially when you're trying to educate young people who, they're these kind of shiny things that entertain them.
I mean, we go through different phases, within with our own kids at home and how we deal with technology. We talk about it a lot. We talk about how these things are made to be addictive, whether it's Fortnite or whether it's TikTok, all of the algorithms and such. It's made to keep you on there. So we talk about that, but even the knowledge of that doesn't break the addictive pathways, because essentially this is brain chemical stuff. This is dopamine in your brain, which is the same pathway as things like cocaine and sugar. So it's really hard. It's really, really complex. In the school, we've gone through different phases of where people bring in their devices all the time. And then the children have come themselves to the conclusion that actually that doesn't really work, because then people are just on their devices all the time and they're not using them for educational purposes. And then, people are showing each other stuff that isn't, that they don't really want to see or whatever.
What does happiness mean to you?
Happiness, I think, is a concept that we've started to see as this constant, which is not true. And there's a neuroscientist from Cardiff called Dean Burnett, who's really an interesting guy.
Good books.
Great books, one, The Idiot Brain, which is great. And he talks about toxic positivity, this idea of quite a shallow live, laugh, love thing, that everybody seems to be trying to grasp at, or at least think that is what the world, this is what, the world and life is just, trying to, that it is possible to attain this mythic level of constant happiness. And maybe that's what enlightenment is. Maybe that's what the monks are all on about, the Buddhist monks. But I don't think so. I think that contentment is something that we can aim for. But a lot of the time, contentment is about being comfortable. And a lot of the time, that's not necessarily good for us, that we are constantly aiming to be comfortable. I just want to be comfortable. I just want to be safe and comfortable. Well, that's not necessarily exposing us to new and exciting things, or helping us learn, or pushing us out of our comfort zone, and, making us do different things to understand more about ourselves. So I'm all about the suffering. Bring on the pain. Bring on the pain. Bring on the suffering. Whilst it's very unpleasant a lot of the time, whether it's grief, whether it's resistance, difficulty, discomfort, all of those things are help us grow as well. There was a really interesting experiment, I can't remember where they did it, but they were trying to recreate the conditions of Mars, and they were growing trees. So they're growing all these sorts of different plants and stuff in a big pod, in a big airtight pod in a desert somewhere, to see how they could grow things on Mars. And these trees just weren't growing very tall. They'd get to a certain height and then they'd stop growing. And they couldn't figure it out for ages, until they finally realized it was the wind. The wind creates the resistance that trees need to grow tall, and have, bigger roots, bigger, stronger roots and such. So I'm really into that idea of resistance. We always need to have resistance. And so what might seem, especially in a time like now in the world where things are so binary and you just see things as, either you believe this or you believe this, maybe that's where we've got to, because we need this binary resistance at this point, and in order for us to push forth to the next stage and do the right thing and save the planet. Maybe it's going to end in a horrible dystopian nightmare. Who knows? The choice is yours. So
bring on the suffering then, you say?
Bring on the suffering, absolutely. And it is where our deepest learning happens, and our deepest humanity and empathy and understanding, I think, understanding of reality, of the world, and of the human condition. And there's such beauty to be found in it. It's when I think we see other humans behaving so gorgeously, is when, they see other people suffering and are trying to be a balm or a comfort or help in some way. So yeah, happiness is overrated. It's lovely to attain it at times. That's the point. It's supposed to be peaks and troughs. And yes, you know, I suppose as you get through life, you do want things to level out a little. Otherwise, it's bloody exhausting. But yeah, we surprise ourselves. There's a lot we can take, and there's still a lot to learn.
What makes you happy then?
Watching my beautiful children be their marvelous selves, and at the moment, both of them are thriving, really thriving, flying, really starting to, feel that competence from them, that they're starting to actually feel like, I can do this stuff. I'm really good at this stuff. And you put a lot, I put a lot into that. So that's wonderful. The Awen Project, and seeing all of the kids that we have there, how they've changed in a year, how much they've grown in confidence and ability and skill, is just wonderful. It's wonderful to be a part of, watching their emotional complexity grow. Mainly just through conversation, just through them being a part of this democratic process. They're constantly talking. There's a lot of communication that goes on. So you can really see everybody growing, which is a joy, a pleasure to be a part of. And yeah, my family, my parents, my grandparents, my husband, just, all of my friends, people really, people and plants.
We're surrounded by a lot of plants at the moment.
I am obsessed.
Can you get any more plants hanging in here?
I could. I've been thinking about training some jasmine to grow
up
on
the
the
wall.
walls, because then it would smell amazing as well. But I find plants have been a real balm for me, actually. I was brought up a proper indoor kid, like microchips, no vegetables, the telly, the four walls. We didn't go camping, we didn't go on walks. It was just not how a lot of working class kids are brought up, it's just not.
Oh yeah, because when you did that documentary, you talked about not really going camping.
Yeah, totally. So it took and then you're very uncomfortable with the outdoors if you've been brought up like that. It's like, why would you walk? I can't walk, and put me in a car. I'm not walking. And so the outdoors, or as soon as there's any adverse weather, you're like, oh, get in. And so it's been a process of opening up to nature for me over the past 10 years, probably. And now I am completely obsessed. I just find it such a huge joy and resource, and just for whatever I need it for, really, whether it's just abundant, isn't it? I mean, it is now. We've got, that's the way that we need to try and keep it. But even in terms of emotionally, I've got such an emotional relationship with nature for what I need, whether it's, to be calmed down, to be excited, whatever. So yeah, my relationship with nature and plants has grown a lot in the last 10 years. And I'm very thankful for that too.
Okay, so last question then. Imagine all your friends and family are down by a nice beach or something, looking out to the sky, nice blue sky and sun shining, and you've hired one of these little planes and it's carrying a long message behind, or a short message, and these might be your final words of wisdom that you want to impart on all your friends and family. What message would be on there?
Ooh, that's a difficult one.
There's lots of thinking going on here.
I mean, I've always said, but this is it's a bit boring.
Yeah, go with the boring. Let's hear the boring one then.
I've always really liked, I think because I spent my youth on planes, that idea of put on your own oxygen mask before helping others. really stuck in my mind, because when I was a kid, I always used to think, oh, if I had children, that would never happen. Like if I'd never put on my own oxygen mask in a crash situation if I had kids. And I think as you grow older, you start to realize that that's the only thing that you can do. Is that actually that's the only thing that you have control over, that as much as you do want to help other people, and you can help other people, you need to go some way towards healing yourself first, to be an effective mover and shaker, however that manifests itself for you. So I think to explore yourself, to be growing in self-awareness, to really start to understand who you are, the good and the bad, the shadows, the shit that you've done, the things you regret, the things that you love about yourself as well. And then like I give myself a kiss in the mirror all the time.
Really?
Yeah, I'm always saying, well done, babes. I know it's hard at the moment, or whatever it might be. I give myself loads of love, and I always have throughout my whole life. I don't know why. It was just innate in me to do it. And I think that's why my mental health has stayed pretty consistent. Being
kind to yourself.
Yeah, just being really, because it's like a lot of the time other people really aren't. And not in a me, myself and I sort of way, because of course we do all massively rely on each other, but just be excellent to yourself as much as you can. But yeah, so it would be put on your own oxygen mask before helping others. And to me, that means something, I think, about healing, about really being able to look at yourself, look at your past, look at the experiences that you've been through, a lot of which has been at the hands of others, trauma at the hands of others. And, doing that deep, hard work of healing yourself to be a kinder human.
I like it. It's quite a long message for the...
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Charlotte Church. It's been amazing.
Oh, thanks, Matt. It was lovely chat.
It was lovely chat, wasn't it? Hooray!